Well, hello again. We are now on session 2B. And so right off the bat, what I need to do is just make one slight retraction and get us back on track. I gave you the title of Christopher Hitchens' book as being God is Not Good. Well, it's actually God is Not Great. So type in God is Not Great on YouTube and then he'll come up. Also, I think you might really enjoy viewing Patcondell's videos on YouTube as well. So after you get through looking at everything that Christopher has to say, tune into Pat to simply type in what have I got against religion, and Patcondell will come up. Or type in Patcondell and his whole site will come up. At any rate, that's minor correction. I'm going to post in the explanation area over on the right side of the video description area. I'm going to post those two items so you can find them. I'm also going to post another location you may wish to go for some really good information, and it's www.digitalmedievalist.com. She has excellent material on there, and she has a listing of books that are available, quality books that are available, and available from good publishers. And if you bought every one of the books she recommended, you would stand yourself well. And you don't have to be a scholar to be able to do that. Okay, one more point on Things Aryan. All right. I mentioned at the close of the last video that I recommended to you that you run away from anything that points towards Aryan claims or approaches, etc. Currently, the neo-Nazis and the various Aryan, so-called Aryan brotherhoods are attempting to justify their position through actually misusing of Things Celtic. So I would caution you very much against that type of thing. It is absolutely not founded, and their arguments are not scholarly, and in fact they are intended to deceive. So I would strongly recommend that you don't have anything to do with them. Moving on. No, you don't have to be a scholar, and I want to make that clear. You do not need to be a scholar in order to have good information related to Things Celtic. What I would say to you, though, is something that I learned many, many years ago, that no one can be an expert in everything. So I have made it a habit in my life to depend upon those who know what they're talking about. People who are, in fact, trained and recognized authorities. In this case, we're talking about academic Celticists, medievalists, as well as archaeologists and linguists. Once again, I would recommend that anyone who is claiming any kind of special spiritual privilege, that you avoid them as well. More likely than not, if they are in fact true to Things Celtic, they wouldn't make such a claim. At any rate, I'll post some links for you in the column to the right, and I recommend strongly that you might want to go and look at these things. In fact, you will find Patcondell's material quite interesting and entertaining, as well as Christopher's. Moving right on. And over the time that we have together, I will consistently, or on a regularly basis anyway, post in the description area other sources that you can look at. So, who were the Celts? And who are the Celts? Where do we find Celts? Ancient, where do they come from? Current, where do we find them now? Okay. So, first of all, it is extremely easy to look at Celtic history and at Things Celtic through what would properly be called rose-colored glasses. And there's been a lot of that. The last 200 years has seen an immense amount of romanticized generalizations about Celts, both in the past as well as in the present. Most such generalizations are not accurate, and those that came as a result of the revival of interest in Europe of things Celtic, generally speaking, are a million miles away from anything accurate. One stereotype that has persisted, although in some respects true, one that has persisted as a generalization is that the Celts were warlike people who went about doing nothing but waging war all over the European continent. As a matter of fact, that's really not true. They were warriors. It was an entire warrior culture. But the latest evidence indicates that their strength was really in trading. And while it was necessary, they were rough times, to have good military. Generally speaking, the Celts, when they were not at war, were in fact farmers and developed families. They also developed an extensive set of roads across the areas that they occupied. Were they formidable warriors? Yes, they were. What many people would like to do is to look back at the Celts, again through rose-colored glasses, and as was popular 100 years ago, kind of the savage that everyone would want to admire, that they were the noble savage. Well, first of all, they weren't savages. Barbarians, yes, but not savages. Go look up the difference. At any rate, there is really no idealizing you can do. They have problems just like anybody else had problems. And also qualities that were admirable as well as not admirable. One of the things that I would like to make sure that we dispel right now, before I have to go on to a 2C, is that there is no such thing, and never was, as a homogeneous Celtic race. You're going to waste your time looking for such a thing. Their ancient unity was one of culture and not of genetics, and was actually made up of various ethnic groups. Now, as many stereotypes as you want to introduce into what Celts were like, especially in body types, I saw quickly in Ireland that just about any fantasy you have about what Celts really looked like, you can find in Ireland, all the way from the tall, redhead, blonde-headed, and blue-eyed, actually very German-looking, all the way down to very short and swarthy people, which is another thing that has been an argument. Where did the Celts come from? Which is important to identify. But not nearly as important as there not being any Celtic race, that it was actually a conglomeration of various ethnic groups. Many speculations have been offered about the original homeland of Celts, including that Celts were really not tall people with blue eyes and painted themselves blue, but really, in fact, were short people, very dark-skinned, and came from northern Africa. Well, however you want to enter into that discussion, certainly there is a certain freedom that you can have. Generally speaking, right now, the theory that is advanced and with which I will go is that the original homeland for the Celts was probably in southern Germany and parts of Bohemia. So that's where the scholarship stands at this particular time, as to where the Celts came from. There is one author that I would like to quote just before this particular segment ends, and the author referring to this, the origin of the Celts, he said, and the Celts came out of nowhere in about the 5th. I kind of like that approach because at least it's very poetic and gives you an idea of how maybe the Mediterranean viewed the sudden onslaught of these hordes that came running into their area. More next video.